Today we will start a audiobook series for a book named How to Read a Book: The Classic Guide to Intelligent Reading, written by Mortimer J. Adler and Charles Van Doren. The book is divided into 4 parts and it has total 21 chapters. Preface to the book. How to Read a Book was first published in the early months of 1940. To my surprise, and I confess, to my delight, it immediately became a bestseller and remained at the top of the nationwide bestseller list for more than a year. Since 1940, it has continued to be widely circulated in numerous printings, both hardcover and paperback, and it has been translated into other languages: French, Swedish, German, Spanish, and Italian. Why then attempt to recast and rewrite the book for present generation of readers? The reason for doing so lie in the changes that have taken place both in our society in the last 30 years and in the subject itself. Today, many more of the young men and women who complete high school enter the complete 4 years of college. A much larger proportion of population has become literate in spite of or even because of the popularity of radio and television. There has been a shift of interest from reading of fiction to the reading of non-fiction. The educators of the country have acknowledged that teaching the young to read in the most elementary sense of the word is our paramount educational problem. A recent secretary of Department of Health Education and Welfare designating the 70s as the decade of reading has dedicated federal funds in support of wide variety of efforts to improve proficiency in this basic skill, and many of those efforts have scored some success at the level at which children are initiated into the art of reading. In addition, adults in large numbers have been captivated by the glittering promises made by speed reading courses, promises to increase their comprehension of what they read as well as their speed in the reading it. However, certain things have not changed in the last 30 years. One constant is that to achieve all the purposes of reading, the desideratum must be the ability to read different things at different appropriate speeds, not everything at the greatest possible speed. As Pascal observed 300 years ago, when we read too fast or too slow, we understand nothing. Since speed reading has become a national fad, this new edition of How to Read a Book deals with the problem and the purposes variable speed reading as the solution. The aim being to read better, always better, but sometimes slower, sometimes faster. Another thing that has not changed, unfortunately, is the failure to carry instructions in reading beyond the elementary level. Most of our educational ingenuity, money, and efforts is spent on reading instructions in the first 6 grades. Beyond that, little formal training is provided to carry students to higher and quite distinct level of skills. That was true in 1939 when Professor James Mursell of the Columbia University's Teachers College wrote an article for the Atlantic Monthly entitled "The Failure of Schools." What is said then in 2 paragraphs that I am going now to quote is still true. Do pupils in the school learn to read their mother tongue effectively? Yes and no. Up to the 5th and 6th grade, reading on the whole is effectively taught and well learned. To what level we find a steady and general improvement, but beyond it, the curves flatten out to a dead level. This is not because a person arrives at his natural limit of efficiency when he reaches the 6th grade. For it has been shown again and again that with a special tuition, much older children and also adults can make enormous improvement. Nor does it mean that most sixth graders read well enough for all the particular purposes. A great many pupils do poorly in the high school because of sheer inaptitude in getting meaning from the printed page. They can improve, they need to improve, but they don't. The average high school graduate has done a great deal of reading, and if he goes on college, he will do a great deal more. But he is likely to be a poor and incompetent reader. Note that this holds true of the average student, not the person who is subject for the special remedial treatment. He can follow a simple piece of fiction and enjoy it. But put him up against a closely written exposition, a careful and economically stated argument, or a passage requiring critical consideration, and he is at a loss. It has been shown, for instance, that the average high school student is amazingly inept at indicating the central thought of a passage or the level of emphasis and subordination in an argument or exposition. To all intents and purposes, he remains a sixth grader's reader till well along in the college. If there was a need for how to read a book 30 years ago, as the reception of the first edition of the book would certainly seem to indicate, the need is much greater today. But responding to that greater need is not the only, nor for that matter, the main motive in rewriting the book. New insights into the problems of learning how to read, a much more comprehensive and better order analysis of the complex art of reading, the flexible application of the basic rules to different types of reading, in fact, to every variety of reading matter, the discovery and formulation of new rules of reading, and the conception of pyramid of books to read, broad at bottom and taper at the top. All these things not treated adequately or nor treated at all in the book that I wrote 30 years ago, called for exposition and demanded at the thorough rewriting that has now been done and is here being published. The year after How to Read a Book was published, a parody of it appeared under the title How to Read Two Books, and Professor I.A. Richard wrote a serious treatise entitled How to Read a Page. I mention both these sequels in order to point out that problems of reading suggested by both of these titles, the jocular as well as the serious one, are fully treated in this rewriting, especially the problem of how to read a number of related books in relation to one another and read them in such a way that the complementary and conflicting things they have to say about a common subject are clearly grasped. Among the reasons of rewriting How to Read a Book, I have stressed the thing to be said about the art of reading and the point to be made about the need for acquiring higher level of skills in this art, which were not taught or developed in the original version of the book. Anyone who wishes to discover how much has been added can do so quickly by comparing the present table of contents with that of the original version. Of the four parts, only part 2, expounding the rules of analytical reading, closely parallels the content of the original, and even that has been largely recasted. The introduction of part 1 of the distinction of four levels of reading: elementary, inspectional, analytical, and syntopical, is the basic and controlling change in the books of organizations and content. The exposition in the part 3 of the different ways to approach different kinds of reading materials, practical and theoretical books, imaginative literature such as lyric poetry, epics, novels, plays, and then history, science and mathematics, social science and philosophy, as well as reference books, current journalism, and even advertising, is the most expensive edition that has been made. Finally, the discussion of synoptical reading in part 4 is wholly new. In the work of updating, recasting, and rewriting this book, I have been joined by Charles Van Doren, who for many years now has been my associate at the Institute of Philosophical Research. We have worked together on other books, notably the 20 volumes of Annals of America, published by Encyclopedia Britannica Inc. in 1969. What is perhaps more relevant to the present cooperative venture in which we have been engaged as co-authors is that during the last 8 years, Charles Van Doren and I have worked closely together in conducting discussions groups on great books and in moderating executive seminars in Chicago, San Francisco, and Aspen. In the course of these experiences, we acquired many of the new insights that have gone into the rewriting of this book. I am grateful to Mr. Van Doren for the contribution he has made to our joint effort. and he and I together wish to express our deepest gratitude for all the constructive criticism, guidance, and help that we have received from our friend Arthur L.H. Rubin, who persuaded us to introduce many of the important changes that distinguish this book from its predecessor and make it, we hope, a better and more useful book. Mortimer J. Adler, Boca Grenade, March 26, 1972.